So what you're saying right now is that Daryl James died and you are right now in a clone body. Is that what you're saying right now?
Yeah, the body, the original, the body that my mother gave birth to, the bones are rotting on Mars somewhere pretty much. And this
Hmm.
is my clone. But it's just, yeah, the way it was explained to me is, and I even said that to Robert. I was like, so the me my mother gave birth to, his bones are rotting on Mars. He said, yes.
I was gonna say,
Hmm?
did you take like a vacation from all this for a while? I didn't see you making
Yeah, I mean,
interviews for like a year or so.
yeah, it's kind of, it's just, I don't know. It's like, I guess I'm getting more used to it, but it's not all that much fun for me. It's kind of like
Yeah.
rehashing, instead of putting my memories, I was trying to let them just,
Feel like you're reliving it?
subside.
Yeah.
Yeah, reliving it. And it's just like you keep on bringing back the past, and it's like you get depressed.
Yeah,
You know?
that's one question
So,
I did want to ask you. Like, it's kind of like when you go to therapy, it's like you got to repeat the shit that happened in your life. It's like, well, you got to relive it over and again, over again. So it must get quite sad. It must get hard to constantly share your story. But what do you do when you're not sharing your story? Like, what does Daryl do on a daily basis?
well, I'm doing a lot of interviews. I mean, I'm doing a lot of what do you call it? I'm going to Lubbock. I'm doing a lot of events right now. So I'm going to Lubbock, and then after that, I'm going to LA. And yeah, I've been invited to that. I thought I was going to get something with David Icke because the reason I've been getting so many interviews is because he put me in I think three of his books. I guess he writes books left and right,
Really?
but
Wow,
he must have like a whole writing team. So he writes, probably a book or two a year. It seems like David Icke.
that's
No kidding.
fantastic.
Yeah.
As far as my free time, I don't like my free time is this. Well, I'm a disabled vet. I have like knee and back, and I've been diagnosed with PTSD and everything like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, from going to Iraq. I mean, I've tried to tell. I had a therapist I told about the program, and he was in the army, and he said he pretty much believed me. And then but
Really?
then you get other therapists where it's like this last guy I had. He was weird. I didn't like.
Thought you were schizophrenic?
No. I mean, he was weird in the sense that I don't know. I tried telling him parts of my story and things like that, and how Robert told me that, you know, they were basically trying to make pedophilia acceptable, and he told me about the whole cuties thing and everything like that on
Oh,
Netflix, like the weird
yeah.
show. And he was saying, he said that the reason they do that is because civilizations fall within like about 100 years once a society accepts pedophilia. And it's just something they do on purpose. They did it with like the Greeks and the Romans. It was, their society. It didn't always accept that, but then near the end of their civilization, they began to
That's
accept that. It's like something the Satanists do.
yeah, that's what Plato wrote about the end of Atlantis, the fall of Atlantis. That's all that with the transgender stuff, all that was part of it. Pedophilia.
Yeah, and he was trying to say that, he was giving me like the legal loopholes of it, about how, and I just thought that was strange. So I stopped seeing that guy. He was just trying to give me, he was being
The
devil's advocate for pedophilia, and I
the
just thought,
legal loopholes.
yeah.
Oh,
It's like if they don't act on their thoughts, then it's considered
Okay.
something else or something. And I thought it was a bizarre conversation. Yeah, I
You
stopped
think?
seeing.
yeah.
Okay.
Stay away from that guy, I think.
Yeah. Did the government
Yeah,
send you to that guy?
what was the VA? It
Oh,
was
there you go.
the Veterans Administration. Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, that's all my medical comes from the VA, and the VA has gotten a lot worse. Like people said, it's just gotten the way it used to be
Do
when
you ever
when Trump was.
get like people maybe from the CIA like watch you? Do you ever feel like maybe you're being watched, or like maybe they're making sure that you know what I mean? Like,
Robert told me I was under protection. He said they won't mess. He said, I won't get messed with that much because I was under some sort of protection where they really weren't allowed to do that. And that whole event he said that the whole event with the vril, the droning or whatever, where I had a close call with being droned, he said that was a keynote. And after that, he said, like, people aren't going to mess with you very much after that.
So you never get like an energy attack of any kind, like anything like that?
I mean, how can you tell? I mean, I don't know. How can I tell?
well,
Maybe I do, in the sense that,
I've just heard I've heard Dr. Greer talk about that, where he like pissed off the right people, and then they came after him when he was alone in this hotel room, kind of like psychically attacked him in a way where they could have killed
yeah.
him.
oh wow.
I mean, I don't have anything like that, except for that thing they put in my front yard, which is kind of weird and suspicious.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like that's like really the only thing, because I know what that stuff can do. It's
Like
like,
it's right in your front yard. And then in the last interview, you were talking about like what it can do. And I have a 5G tower near not far from me as well. And it really got me thinking, like, if they can do that back then and you got one in your front yard, like if you're hearing things, if you're hearing people calling your name and there's no one there, oh God.
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
like
they
I
can
hope that.
listen. Like they
Yeah.
But I
can
mean,
just they can like straight up look in your room and everything, look in your whole house. They say with Wi-Fi you can do it, but with the 5G, they can hear everything you're saying, and whether or
Mm.
not you have Wi-Fi, they can just tap in your house.
yeah, that was something I was told. It was just that's just a part of life now, and even on their world, even on the Tigetan world and stuff, you don't have privacy. There's like no such thing as privacy, especially with telepaths. You know what I mean? So it's just something. I guess as we
Oh,
evolve, we have to
right.
kind of accept that. Like there's no such thing as privacy. And Robert even told me that. He's like, you have to get that through your head. He said, you have no privacy. That nobody does. He said, if
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if you have TikTok or whatever. If they want to hear you and they want to listen in and they want to see what you're doing, they can do it. There's nothing you can do to stop it.
That actually gives me a level of safety when you say it like that, because we did talk about that. Like, I do believe the future is telepathic. And so when you say it like that, it's not as daunting.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, the
because
lies are over.
nobody has privacy, so everybody knows each other's business. So I mean, it's good in the sense where it's stopped. Like if you know someone's up to no good, you can tell right away. You
Yeah.
know.
I guess you don't need politicians anymore, do you? Right?
No, yeah.
No, everything will be completely different, right? Our whole way of
Yeah.
living will be completely different.
You won't need courts either. You won't need courtrooms, lawyers, none of that shit.
Well, that was something else he told me was like, you know, he said there'd only be like a handful of Congress left, and they would be like the monitors. We'd have like an AI, but it would be like a regulated AI in the sense that it would just be in one point. It would be like an AI in one point, so it wouldn't be like on the World Wide Web or the internet or anything like that. And that would be for voting, to make sure that all of our votes counted, and there was no such thing as voter fraud, and everything would be voted on. And there would just be like 4 or 5 people that would be like elected, and they would be the ones that would like monitor the AI to make sure it's working properly. And that's how our politics would be. It would just be completely, voting for everything, but it would be
Hmm.
monitored by an AI, so there wouldn't be any kind of voter fraud or anything like that.
Did he mention anything about voter fraud in our last election?
Yeah, he
Whether
said it
that,
was. Well, I know. Well, not the last, but he said the first one it would be stolen, and we would
which one's
basically say
that?
the first time Trump won, he said that election was stolen, but the military stole it back. But then he said they weren't expecting Biden to win, and the only reason he knew Biden was going to win is because he was looking down my own timeline. So that was a whole variable thing. with the looking glass. That was like the 6% variable that they weren't expecting to happen, and it did happen with Biden, he said. But yeah, originally Trump was going to win according to the looking glass predictions. But he said just by looking down my own timeline, looking to my own future, he said, yeah, he said Trump doesn't win, and he was kind of amazed. It was like something they weren't expecting.
Oh, wow.
But he says it doesn't matter because it's going to happen anyways, no matter what.
Yeah,
They can
'cause you
prolong
mentioned,
it, but they can't stop it.
didn't you mention in one that, excuse me, Hillary Clinton actually won the one election, the first one, and that led, wasn't it you, and it led to the whole planet coming under like alien control, like she let the aliens just take this place over immediately or something? Was that you?
Well, he told me when Hillary Clinton won the election, we got into a nuclear war with China that was tended to be lost, and then America fell, and yeah, and then there were like all these forced breeding programs, and then that's how they created like the Mike Pence people and things
Right,
like
that's
that.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's how they
Yeah, we
created like
talked about
one race of people doing it like that.
This looking glass
it. Yeah.
technology, is that here on Earth? Like, can anyone look at that, or is there like gatekeepers and things like that surrounding this technology?
Well, I mean, there are gatekeepers, but he told me every underground base has one, a looking glass technology. Every
Oh,
one.
wow.
Yeah, he told me that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Out of all
So,
the underground bases on the earth, they all have one.
okay. So, in your story on the timeline, did we go to the off-world Germans? Is that series? Was
I
that
don't remember the name. I don't remember the name of the world, like, you know. And like I said, I don't like what was it, series Colony B or something that Tony
Yeah,
wrote
that's why I
about.
bring that up. Yeah.
I I stay away from other people's work, and I don't really remember what it was called. I think it could have been called, I don't even know, like New Deutschland for all I know. But it was, I don't remember, like,
Right.
I don't remember names very well, and I don't remember faces very well. It's just like part of my block.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
The names I do remember, it was things that Robert told me personally. That's why I
Yeah.
remember.
Can you take us through what happened? Was it the Dark Fleet that's Nachtwaffen, right? Is that what you entered into first, and then you went into um Solar Warden after that?
Well, yeah, I guess it was Solar Warden, but Robert said you were with them, is how he put it. And then that's when I said, you know, they're the Pleiadians, and he said we call them Nordics. So yeah, I was more like living with them
Yeah.
because they kind of like segregated themselves from the people, like the Terrans, like the people from Earth. They kind of lived like it was like a joint. It was like a military. They, you know, in the military they call it like a joint task force. It was kind of like a joint task force. It was, you know, two different, you know, alliances kind of teaming up together. And it was their technology, but our materials. And one of the agreements was they can commandeer the ship anytime they wanted. That happened one time.
So, one question I have for you is when you went into the secret space program, you said you wanted to get on the good side, so to speak, because you wanted to get technology because you believe that it could have saved your father's life. And so you wanted to get a hold of that technology. Did you actually get a hold of this technology, or was that just a ploy to get you involved in the secret space program?
Well, I didn't want to get a hold of it personally. I wanted it to be released to the public, the
Yeah.
general public is what. Yeah. So like, I didn't get a hold of it. I mean, I got a hold of it in the sense that yeah, they used it constantly. They, you know, med beds were something they used a lot because even doing things like going through jumps and portals that affects your DNA. Doing it enough times, but it's something that a med bed can repair. But then other
Mm.
things like, you know, clinical death and you know, where you die, but then they bring you back in like a healing tank, and the healing tank itself, because that's almost like a form of clinical death, just going into a healing tank. It kind of like liquefies you and reconstitutes you, and
Oh,
you know,
whoa.
yeah, being
Is that what
cloned,
it
things.
does?
that takes away. Hey, I don't know. He kind of explained. He said it's not good for you, and I said, "What do you mean?" He said like takes a part of you away, like it takes a piece of
Oh,
you. It's like making copies of a copy on a Xerox machine. It's like it gets lighter
yeah.
and lighter every time you do it.
Is that
Yeah.
like in that movie Multiplicity? Did you ever see that with Michael Keaton?
Yeah, I guess like pretty much.
Every
It's
every
you kind
time
of
they made a clone, he got dumber and dumber. Like he got a little more goofy.
yeah, but I mean
Is that really what happens?
it's less than dumber. It's more like I don't know. It takes apart. It can take away like your sanity. It does a lot of stuff. It's not really like your intelligence. It's like being age regressed too many times. That'll take away your sanity. A lot of this stuff, if you do it too much, it can basically make you like insane, like crazy. And it doesn't happen every time, but you run the risk the more and more you do it.
Have you ever run into someone from the secret space program? I know you said you didn't remember names and things like that, but is there any, I mean, you're a part of the woke community, or not the woke community, sorry, the disclosure community, I should say. Have you come across anyone who's been on a podcast that you're like, wait a minute, I remember you?
No, no, and that's kind of the reason why I do these events and everything else, these,
Yeah.
ET and UFO events. I'm kind of trying to like see if somebody recognizes me or knows me, or yeah, if I can
Mhm.
meet up with somebody that's still in this program.
Yeah.
So, well, like I said, whenever I went to Nottingham, this guy knocked on my door one time in the barracks, and he was like, "Hey, we're going to Nottingham," and that woman April was there, and she was the one that I knew on the moon. She was the woman who was on the moon, who was like the nurse that I was with, but she was an IT. She was like a computer tech on the base, and they brought this other man, and he was really strange. He wore glasses, and he just stared at me, and he was kind of tall and goofy. And when I told Robert about it, I was like, "Well, is that why you guys, invited me to Nottingham because you were trying to make me feel better or something? That they could tell I was taking antidepressants and everything, which I never did before." And he said yes, and I said, I asked him about this man with glasses that was just staring at me. Why did they bring him along? And I don't remember exactly what he said as far as bringing him along, but he said he's on your ship. He said he's in the secret space program, and he was on the USS Nimitz. And yeah, he was just staring at me, and I asked Robert. I said, why was he doing that? I said he looked at me like I was famous, and he said, well, on your ship you are. And he said, how was he looking at you? And I kind of did it the way he just kind of like looked back and forth. He just stared at me everywhere I walked and like had like a smile on his face. And yeah, he said he was on my ship. He like came back down to Earth for a little while. And yeah, but he was actually on the ship I was on. I guess they knew of me on the ship.
Is that because you were king of the Targettans? Is that why he was looking at you like, oh my God?
Yeah, because that's not common, like at all. It's not something they really do. It's not common to be genetically compatible enough with them. And
Yeah.
I think it had something to do with. I think the highest concentration is like northeastern European, like Finland, the Baltics, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, like that whole area. Like those are the
That's
people
Mm.
me.
that are most genetically compatible with them. But
That's me.
yeah, yeah. And he said, yeah, just that and also it's usually that they want something from you. Maybe like some sort of ability that you have that they want like in their genetic bloodline. And that was a
Mm.
big part of it too. He called me a what do he called it a
Called you a package
empathic
one time.
telepath.
Oh,
Huh?
can you say one time when there was something they met you on Ganymede or someplace like that, and they almost went to war over you? They had to pull contracts out. I guess when the Targettans came to get you, but they were calling
Yeah, I
you a
don't know.
package.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Ganymede, but it was just like a space station.
Yeah.
It was like a kind of space station. But yeah, he called me a empathic telepath, which is kind of like a universal translator kind of thing, where I don't need to know the language of the people that I'm talking to, and they could be a higher density than me. I can still communicate with them, because he brought up the whole thing about being able to talk to the children and about how they spoke Pig Latin, a type of Pig Latin, and they couldn't do that. That was something they couldn't do, and they were very amazed by that. And
could you take us through what, like, the whole situation of becoming king of the Taigetans? Can you take us through that experience, what happened and what led you there?
it was, well, it was many things. It was they they can look down timelines. They knew I would be tortured, and so it was like kind of like a way to try to get me out. Because in the sense that even if I was just like a prior king, it was a violation, of the peace treaties they had and things like that. But the bigger part was the two women I was with. They knew I was loyal to them, and I wasn't going to do it. So they figured if they played off my ego, that I would be more willing to do it, and it worked. So it was like the queen came to my house, and she basically said that the king was old and he didn't want to do it anymore. Like, he was very old and he didn't want to do it anymore. And then she would like me to be the king. So that's kind of like how it happened. And I made candles on their world. I like dipping candle, because I was a pilot and now I wasn't doing anything else. I was like a music teacher. I started teaching children music, and I also just started making those carved candles that you dip in like several different colored waxes and then you carve them. I did that, and I made one for her and the queen, and I guess she liked it. And then later on
Okay.
that night, she came to my house. Yeah. So yeah, it was.
Is this a part two of I just met this person and we had sex?
No, well, I knew her a long time. Yeah, I
Oh,
knew her a long.
okay.
Yeah, I knew of her a long time. Like, I knew who she was. I met her. When I first came to their world, I did this very like kind of elaborate entry with all the people that I got from the moon and things like that, people from Earth. Almost like they call it like a dog and pony show in the military, where you all march in formation and we all march to the palace. And then I started playing guitar, classical guitar afterwards, and I gave the guitar to the king, and it was a very expensive guitar that I got, and I gave it to him. And yeah, that's how I met them. And
So
so
do they
that's,
play music at all? It doesn't sound like they have like an ability or a want to actually make their own music. Is that true?
they have a kind of music where it's almost like, I don't even know, kind of like Enya kind of thing, where they take like natural sounds from their nature and they kind of put it together in a beat and a rhythm. But as far as like composing music, that's something that from Earth. That's one of the things that we're really good at. It's one of the reasons why they want us, as far as you know our imagination, our creativity. I think a lot of that has to do with our short lifespan. That we
Yeah.
have this sense of doing as much as possible before we die. Like, they don't really have that kind of uh,
We also
mindset.
don't have that technology they have. Don't they have like those printers that can print you out a space shuttle if you want and all that stuff? You just type it in, and they print you something out.
They can't. I don't. They can't print a space shuttle. Those actually have to be made, like just as we would
I was just saying,
engineer.
for example, didn't you say there was something like whatever you wanted, there was a program and it would print it out for you? Like you didn't have to
Yeah,
build anything.
there was a kind of 3D printer, and yeah, but that was just for smaller things. Like, you could put something on the smart glass pad, and then you head into like the main area of town, like into their city, kind of. And there was a woman behind a desk that would just hand you whatever you asked to be made for you. And yeah, it was a kind of like complex 3D printer. And she would always ask me, what is this for? What is that for? And I would just tell her. And
I
yeah, it
mean, if
was
you think about it, if you have some technology like that, there's no need for you to learn to be a builder, right? So they don't have construction workers over there as much as you would here. And you know what I'm saying? Like they don't actually manifest like we do.
well, they did have a construction in the sense where, like I said, I started showing them things like music. So we actually had stands and everything like that. And when it comes for something larger, yeah, it's they do have construction in that sense where they built almost like, they started building like I wouldn't call it an arena, but almost like an outdoor kind of sports area is what I wanted to have built. And it's because they have this whole mindset of, a whole. They're like a collective. It's almost like being in like an Amish community. Like once one person sees someone building something, it's like they all just kind of like congregate and come together, and they all start helping you build something because they have this kind of different
Wow.
group mentality that we don't have. So they have a very strong group mentality. So once, yeah, if they see somebody doing something, they'll come up and ask them what they're doing, and then it becomes 3 people, and then 10 people, and you get several hundred people all helping. So it's
Could
something,
you
once they see something
imagine if
happening, they all kind of chip in.
could you imagine if life was like that here on Earth, how incredible it would be? Like that just sounds amazing to me. Did it feel like heaven over there to you, like the way that they lived?
I mean, it did in a sense. It was I remember the sun wasn't as close as our sun, so it wasn't hot. They had control of their weather, so they really didn't have strong winters, and they didn't have hot summers. It was always just like a very mild temperature. It would get cool at night, but then it would be warm during the day.
How about
It
bugs?
rained early morning.
How about bugs?
Yeah, do they have bugs and mosquitoes and all that noise, or they take care of that?
No, no, they got rid of all the insects. They have a kind of
Oh,
synthesized
wow.
bacteria for vegetation, decomposing vegetation. They have worms because they didn't really fish. They had almost like they had a machine that would fish for them. It was like a net, and it was kind of almost like a drone that would just kind of drop a net, and it would get many fish at a time, and that's how they got their fish. But then I just started fishing, and I started teaching like the kids how to find worms. And they had very big, like nightcrawler sized worms. They had very large worms, so
Oof.
they had worms to decompose their soil and things like that, make it more nutritious. But they didn't have anything like mosquitoes or gnats or flies. So it
Hmm.
was, yeah. But like I said, they created like kind of a bacteria to decompose things. I remember one time I saw almost like a stag. Uh, I was out in the woods and I saw that. So they did have wildlife, but they didn't eat like large game. They didn't eat red meat like us. They ate fish. But yeah, it had a very big rack and a lot of like points, a huge antler with a lot of points all over it. And everything there was like bigger. Like their animals were larger than we have over here.
Really? How about their fruit and all? I've heard like in Inner Earth and stuff like that, they got fruit that's the size of a basketball. Is that the
They have
same thing
large
over there?
fruit and it's more flavorful than anything we have here on Earth. It's really good. Their food is really good. If you want to have a conversation with like, especially a woman, you just compliment them on their food, and they'll just talk to you for like 20 minutes about their food. On the
So you're saying
ships,
they're all Italian? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, kind of. But on their ships, they a third of the ship is hydroponics, and one of their beliefs on their long lifespan is they get everything off the vine and onto your plate within about 20 minutes. Everything is very fresh. And they don't cook like we
Really?
do. It's more like a steaming process. They just have like a light steaming, and it's very
Yes.
good. Everything is very
That's
good.
good. When I was vegan, I learned that when you cook the vegetables and whatever it is that you're cooking, if you get it to a certain temperature, you're essentially killing the nutrients in it. So it's interesting that they get it to a certain temperature, like a light steam, because that it cooks it just enough to be good, but it still holds all the nutrients. That's really, really how we should be eating here.
Sure enough.
And yeah, the on the ship you had to drink a kind of blue liquid that would be like your amino acids and your proteins, your B vitamins, and because they couldn't have a fishery on the ship, it would be just too big, and it just wouldn't be something that they would want to do. And the fish wouldn't be healthy because they'd be in a fishery. They wanted everything to be very healthy, very nutritious. They were big on food. It was like a big part of their life. But it's kind of like here on Earth, we all have, no matter what our age is or our race is or anything like that, everybody can kind of break bread, as they say, in the sense that everybody has to eat. So it's just a universal thing where, yeah, everybody eats, and that's when conversations happen, and that's when people talk about their day, things like that, when you're eating at the table.
Do you?
And it was.
I was gonna say, do you go to bed, wake up at the same time? Like, what's that like? What's a typical day like for you?
Yeah, you went to sleep. I don't think they slept like us. They were very light sleepers. I had nightmares for a while when I first got on their ship, and I had like night terrors, and they would wake up extremely easy. So I think almost like their sleep really wasn't like a deep REM like us. Their sleep was more like almost like a meditation. It seemed like it didn't really even seem like a sleep. But yeah, they were very light sleepers. You could wake them up very quickly. And
I got a
yeah,
question for you. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you went to bed at night and then you woke up in the morning, and that's pretty much how it worked.
All right, I got one for you. You said this on a podcast a few years ago that you mentioned sleep. So I'm saying you were sleeping with one of these Taigetan women, and apparently she was able to get into some kind of thing where you guys were flipping consciousness, where you traded consciousnesses, like you were looking out of her eyes.
Yeah, like that's how their intercourse works. It's not like, and they really don't even I don't even know. I guess because it's a higher form of consciousness or enlightenment, they don't really have the whole sexual drive like we do as much in that sense. And yeah, like a man or a woman might go years without having a partner, and they're fine with that. And yeah, yeah, she's on top and the man is laying down, and she would like look up for about 5 or 10 seconds, and then look down and lock eyes. And then whenever she locked eyes, you switch consciousness. And then first time it happened to me, it startled me because I didn't know if I was going to stay like this or what was happening. And then I just went back into my body, like I blinked my eyes and I was back. And then yeah, then she did it again. She looked up and she looked back down, and then it became almost like an out of body experience where yeah, it was almost we went out of the ship and we were in space, and it was just kind of one of those things where I couldn't tell if it was like hours or days, and all of a sudden I just woke up and it was over. And that's just how it worked with them. But it's they have sex pretty much like us until they reach about 40, and then at 40 they reach a kind of like spiritual maturity, and then they just do it like that after that. And yeah, that's how it worked.
Oh wow, that's something to look forward to.
It's interesting
yeah,
that
I mean,
you said astral, like you were out of body. Would you call that like astral sex?
it was kind of like, yeah, it's basically it. You didn't even know what was really happening. You weren't attached to your body anymore while the event was actually happening. And then when it was over, you just came back, and it was almost like I just opened my eyes and I was back, and that's how it worked.
And did she become pregnant through that process as well, or?
Yeah, that's how they reproduce.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. Can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I feel like a virgin again.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you feel like you missed out because you were like, I don't know, like that's really interesting topic to talk about. It's like, we're gonna have intercourse, but we're gonna leave the body at the time so you don't know what's going on. It's like, what? It's really cool
I
though.
want I want to let you know what you look like to me while we're doing this. But
Wow.
yeah, it's pretty
So
funny.
can you take us through the process of when you became a father? I think you said you had hundreds of daughters and sons. What was that like?
Well, like with my first my first son, I had a son first, and I'm pretty sure Robert said I named him David after my father, so I remember that. And after they have the baby, I'm not sure if the pregnancy is as long. I don't think it's as long. I don't remember though. But after they have the baby, they go through like a bonding process where you can't like get near them. They get they don't speak that much. They say one or two words to you if you say something to them. Um, they yeah, they just focus on the baby. They don't work. They just stay at home and they nurse the baby and they just stay with their babies. They hold them and that's it. And I didn't know that that's how it worked. I remember she said, "I'm going to change when I have the baby." And they have this kind of policy where they'll tell you something once, and if you don't listen, then they say you need the experience. Is how they put it. So
You broke up.
they'll
What
tell
was it again? They tell you
oh,
something once and
you need the experience. As what
okay.
as like their policy. They'll say something to you once, and if you don't listen to them, then they'll say you need the experience. So, which is kind of how life works, you know.
Yeah, isn't it?
But yeah, my father used to say to my mother, like, he'll figure it out when he gets older. But yeah, that's kind of like how it works. You need actual real world experience to actually learn anything in life. But yeah, so they go through this bonding process. I didn't know, and I was trying to hold my baby, and I was trying to hold my son, and the baby was in her arms at the time, and I was just trying to put my hand behind his head, and I was trying to pull him towards me because I thought she was going crazy. I didn't know what was wrong with her because nobody ever told me that this is how it works, and she hit me and it like knocked me down. They're pretty strong,
Oh,
and like I went to get up and I went to like walk towards her and say, "What did you hit me?" Like I was upset. She hit me and it knocked me down, and then she just started screaming at the top of her lungs. Like she looked at me and just started screaming. So I just walked away from her, and I asked the co-pilot or the navigator, who was one of them that I worked with all the time. He was probably the first person, like a man I had befriended, and they have a kind of hand-to-hand combat that they practice a lot, the men. And I asked him if he wanted to practice after work, and he said yes. So we were practicing, and they're much stronger than you. So I would like lose every time that I just get thrown down to the ground just about every time. And I started hitting him because I was upset, and he was throwing me down harder, and it ripped one of my nails off. I don't know if it got snug on his attached to his uniform or something, and it ripped one of my nails off because I had long nails from playing classical guitar. And I turned around and I started yelling and like cussing. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "When he threw me down, I ripped off my nail." And I had my back turned towards away from him, and he like put his hand on my shoulder and turned me around. And he like locked eyes with me, and it's like this thing they can do where he looked at me and he said, "What's wrong?" And it's almost like they're kind of looking into your soul, and you're kind of compelled to tell the truth. And I told him what was happening. I was like, "She had the baby, and there's something wrong with her. I don't know what's happening." And he said, "You need to talk to Elder," is what he said, which was like the oldest male on the ship. And he was with Mother, and he kind of, like I said, he kind of handled disputes and everything like that. So I went to him, and he was already waiting for me. He was very tall. He always sat down. They can't really move very well once they get older. They get so tall. Their bones keep growing. But like their organs don't, their skin doesn't. So they get kind of like this, I don't even know, like I wouldn't say translucent, but kind of like when we get older, you know, the back of the hand and stuff, it gets kind of like not really see through, but it gets kind of
Your
thin.
skin thins out.
Yeah, and they get very big cheekbones, you know, because their bones keep growing, and he had a long white beard. He had long white hair, and I told him what was happening. I told him I tried to hold the baby, and he said, "You didn't hurt the baby, did you?" And I said, "No, no, of course not. But I don't know what's wrong with her." And then he explained it to me that they go through like a 10-month bonding process with their babies, where you can't get near them when that happens. And I said, "Why didn't anybody tell me this?" And he said, "You're right. Somebody should have told you." And I said something like, you know, "Thank you. Finally, somebody's agreed with me." I thought I was going crazy. And then he said there was like another woman who just arrived on the ship. And I said, "Well, I'm with, you know, the woman I was with at the time was named Swaru." And I said, "Well, I'm with her." And he said, "That's just the way it is. Like that's how it works." Because the men go through like they rut, almost like they rut every 6 months for about 2 weeks, and the women go through this 10-month bonding process. You know, rutting is like what bucks do. It's like a male version of going into heat.
They
And
talked about that in Star Trek too. In Star Trek 3. If you ever saw that, the Search for Spock, he went through something called Pomfar.
yeah, but they don't die. I think it's Star Trek. They'll die if they don't find a
No,
mate.
this
They don't die.
Spock, it was like you just said, every like so many years they go through something, and it was painful for him.
Yeah, yeah, it's painful, and it's like you know, when you see it, it's almost like they have Tourette's. They'll say something violent, but then they'll kind of like shake their head and try to snap themselves out of it. They'll like say something like, you know, "I'll break your neck," or you know, something like that. They'll just say something violent to you, and then they kind of like shrug it off. So when it's happening to the men, they isolate themselves in their room, and yeah, so that's just how it is. And it's not like they're polygamous, but in the sense that it's almost like a biological thing for them. It's not really a, you know, a, a life choice. But and their women to men ratio is about 30 to 1. So there's about, for every one man, there's about 30 women. And
Get
you
out.
see that, you know, on their world. When you go to their world, there's a lot more women than there are men.
Is that a
Wow.
good thing?
Yeah, but I mean, because they don't really have that whole. I don't even know. It's not even. I mean, there's roles in the sense that I wouldn't say the women are like oppressed or anything like that, but there's none of this. You know, our society. I think our society, they teach men and women to kind of be in conflict, and they don't really have that conflict, I guess you would say. So you know
So
that doesn't really exist with them.
so when you say this, like you were having a child with Swaru, and they give you this other woman for the time being, is there any kind of animosity between these women? Is there any of that going on? The cat fighting, whatever you want to call it?
No, they don't have jealousy, like really like the same way we do. I think it's just because it's a higher kind of existence, and plus, you know, it's not a societal thing. It's kind of in their DNA. It's in their genetics to be that way. It's just the way they are. And it did happen with Mother on their world when I was with Mother, but I remember Mother's name was Shara. I remember that, and Robert told me that. And I was with Leader at the time as well, and like a woman, I was becoming like a leader, almost like a leadership position. They call them Leader, and Leader is a man and a woman together, and they're both, that's what their rank is, the Leader. And I wasn't with her, but it was like a political thing. It became political on their world. They become political like anything else, and yeah, like it just basically, I would be with her with Leader, and I said, "Well, what about Mother? You know, she has all this, you know, power. She had like this rank, this political power." And she said, "You know, I have as much power as her, so there's nothing she can do. Nothing she can say." And when I confronted her about this, she like attacked me. And I remember Robert told me about that. You know, mother attacked you. She attacked you. And then she like later on that day, she came after you with a knife. And
Wow.
I said, is that common with them? And he said, no. And I said, well, why did that happen? He said, it's because of you. And I said, well, what did I do? He said, it was nothing you did. It was just because of you. It was like, you know, she became like obsessed with you, which is something they really doesn't happen with them. But he said, I don't know, maybe I was just a variable they weren't expecting, but it was almost just something. It probably is part because they're empathic, they're telepaths, so they kind of pick up on people's behaviors. Maybe she became more aggressive because I was more aggressive. I don't really know, but yeah, it was just something that happened.
So let me ask you, there was at one point you decided to get all these people together and go back to the moon to save some children?
Well, I mean, the moon was, Robert told me that I helped them on the moon. He said they liked you on the moon. You helped them, and I said, did I free them? And he said, no, you didn't free them. They were already freed when you got there. He said, but you inspired them. I was kind of telling them, you know, they were still living that whole kind of brothel life where I don't know, they really didn't have individual partners, and they were still living that way. And I encouraged them to start families, and I kind of gave them a purpose, is what Robert said. And yeah, and I recruited a bunch of them to fight with us. You know, at about half of them stayed on the moon, but the other half came with us on the ships and started, you know, I started training them on the ship itself, a large group of them to, because we later on we did eventually get into a conflict. It's almost like a Cold War with the Draconians, and then you know, we later on got into a fight with them. And the way a conflict happens, it was actually under almost like a banner of truce when we attacked them. And so it's something they really didn't do, but I talked them into it because it's just how the reptiles fight. So like, why shouldn't we just fight like them? And the way, you know, so they weren't expecting us. It was like an ambush. They weren't expecting us to attack them. And they have like these smaller pods that will lock onto the ship, and it'll cut through the hulls of the ship and then blow the hull out. So it's almost like an old form of the way they used to fight. You know, the Navy would fight with the Marines in the old wooden ships, where they would board the ship and they would take over the ship. And that's how it would happen. It's when you're in like a conflict, you don't want to blow up the ship because there's technology that you might not know of. I mean, they pretty much know all the technology, but you can always make improvements. So ETs are very big on, you know, they're yeah, like what's that word? They're scavengers, kind of, when it comes to tech. They try to find new forms of tech, or you know, something that's been improved on. But also, there's people on there that could be, you know, there could be their own people there, and they have the AI in their bodies, so they really don't have control of what they're doing. They're almost like slaves. And there's also consciousness, you know, that they store people's individual like souls. Then they use that for artificial intelligence to interact with the artificial intelligence. So you just don't blow up a ship. You try to disable it, and then you board it, and then you take it. You know, you take over the ship that way. So that's
What
kind
do
of
you
how.
do with these souls when I understand the technology, but when you find, let's say I this maybe for somebody else, but they have souls that they put in these little glass containers of some kind, these glass bricks. They keep your consciousness in something like that. So what do you do
Yeah,
when you
that's like,
find that?
well, you just take them all out. They're in, you know, like kind of like canisters. You take them all out, and they can be, you know, I mean, you free them, you let them go back to source, or they can be reborn. I remember that happened to Elder. Elder was killed on the ship, and we were being attacked one time, and it was one of those things where it happened in the middle of the night, and it's something that shouldn't have happened. Like, we must have had an inside, person, somebody that was working for the other side that somehow took down the shields. And our ship was boarded by mantises. Mantises there's so many of them, like insectoids in general. They're usually like, they're kind of like mercs, but they can do other things, but there's just so many of them, they become like mercenaries as well, almost like piracy. And they boarded our ship, and we all got out, and we were in like these escape ships. So we had these like escape ships. And I remember my children, it was like I had a son and a daughter then, and they looked at me and they said, Dad, what about mother? You have to help mother. And I realized it's like when you're with someone a long time, you create a strong telepathic bond with them. And like mother was kind of like the headmaster of like the schools that they went through. And so they had a strong bond with her. And I kind of saw on their faces, I saw her face. So I could see it was almost like she was trying to communicate to me through them. So I ran to go get her. And I got to where they lived, and they were just both sitting there like side by side. They were sitting down. And I ran up to mother and I said, "Can you run?" And she said, "No." And she looked scared. And then Elder said out loud, he said in English, "Take her." And I grabbed her and I just threw her over my shoulder like in a fireman's carry. And he stood up and he kind of like he had to squat down and kind of shuffle his feet out the doorway. He was so tall. He was probably around 14 and a half feet tall. He was very tall. I never saw him stand up before. And I heard him yell, like a really deep yell. And I kind of like, put my shoulder against the wall and peered through the doorway, and I saw it was, mantises. And so I ran the other way, and then, he was killed. And I ran and I got to the escape pod, and I handed her off to someone else. And then I saw like a flash, and then I felt someone touching my leg, my knee, like my shin. I thought it was one of my kids, and when I looked down, it was my arm was hanging off, like it was still hanging together by my uniform, and it was just like my forearm, and like my fingers were kind of rocking back and forth and like touching my shin. And I looked down, and I saw like the bones, and it looked like cooked pork chop kind of bones. It's like I saw like the marrow was cooked. And I looked down, I looked into my own chest cavity, and I could see like my heart beating. And then I passed out, and I woke up in a healing tank. But I'm sorry, I kind of went off into like a thing. The initial question was.
Natalie's not going to eat for a while now, so we're good.
I'm going vegan again. Yeah.
No,
you
that
saw
was
your own heart?
Yeah, I saw my own heart beating. I saw the bottom of my lung, like the lung was cut off. It was like this whole side of my body was just like blast. They hit me with plasma or something, or a laser. And I could see the inside of like the bottom of my right lung. And I kind of looked across, and I saw like the breastbone was still kind of there, but the skin was cooked off, and I kind of was able to like see through and see like I don't know, it was like I saw glistening like moving. Because it was still dark. It was like in my chest. I kind of saw like a glistening moving, and I realized it was my own heart, and then I just passed out once I saw that.
And take us through what happened after that. Like, how did you? I mean, you're still here. What happened? How did you stay alive?
Well, I came to, and I was in darkness. And I went to move. I went to move my right arm, and there was nothing there still. And so I moved my left hand around, and I felt like smooth. I was inside of like something smooth and round. And I went to look up, and immediately it really hurt, and I felt a tingling all the way down to my toes. And I went to like feel what was on my neck, and I had like a cable in my neck. And it's like when you reach clinical death, they kind of put this cable into your neck that keeps the electrical impulses going to your brain, so your consciousness stays there. So the soul thinks the body's still alive, so it stays there. And it was a healing tank. So it's like but that's something they put you in when you get really messed up, when you reach clinical death. and it's a way to keep you alive. Yeah, I was probably in a healing tank for several hours, and I just went back. I remember I heard a voice in my head, and it was the navigator, and I heard him say sleep. So I just went back to sleep.
So that those healing tanks, they break you down to a cellular level. They get you down to an atomic, I should say, level that they heal you on based on your DNA. They rebuild your DNA. Is that how that works?
Yeah, it kind of like liquefies you almost. All the tech in your body, because they do have like a kind of tech that they use. It all falls to the bottom of the tank, and so they have to reinstall, the technology back into your body. Things that help you, run faster, keep you alive longer if you're injured. Things that make your body more, efficient.
Mhm.
So yeah, it kind of like liquefies you and then puts you back together almost. And it's like
It
a form of
completely
that.
breaks you back down and then builds you back up completely like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you become like an actual like literal liquid, but it's something similar because all the tech floats down to the bottom of the tank, and it has to be
Right.
reinstalled after you get out of a healing tank.
Wow.
So
So we're kind of doing. Go ahead.
So I'm just like, where am I going to go with this? Did you have is near-death experiences even possible in that situation, or is there like something they contain your soul in whilst fixing your body? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember Robert told me I died the third day I was on Mars when I was in Dark Fleet, and this was when I was in the office with him. And yeah, I kind of had like almost like a crisis, like a kind of a panic attack when he told me that. And I was, what's the point of any of this if I'm just a clone? I'm not even like the real Daryl. And he said, you don't understand. And I said, what? He said they were able to salvage your consciousness, is how he put it. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, your soul, if that makes you feel any better. He said they were able to salvage your soul, and they put you in a clone that was like your original body in every way. And he said it's you. He said it's you. So yeah, they have it as long as they can salvage the consciousness, which they have a bit the ability to do on the ships and things like that. If people die, they can almost like capture the soul and then put it right back into an exact clone. And then they have clones waiting for you in the Dark Fleet in case you do die. They can just put you into another soul. And
So what you're saying right now is that Daryl James died and you are right now in a clone body. Is that what you're saying right now?
yeah, the body, the original, the body that my mother gave birth to, the bones are rotting on Mars somewhere pretty much. And this is my clone. But it's just, yeah, the way it was explained to me and I even said that to Robert. I was like, so the me my mother gave birth to, his bones are rotting on Mars. He said, yes. And he's just kind of, I remember when when I was in the mines of the moon, they called the men meat sacks, is what they call you, because that's kind of like what you are. You're like a meat sack.
Yeah.
They have like it's like a way to insult you, but it's also like a higher form of enlightenment, or that you realize that you're not really your body in the sense you're a consciousness, you're a soul. So that's not really you. And as long as they can salvage the original consciousness, it's you pretty much in every way. But like I said, it does take like a part of you away from yourself.
Does your body heal the same? Well, I mean, I don't know if you would really remember. How old were you when you essentially died?
25.
25.
Because it was when it was 3 months after I joined, like I got into the actual Dark Fleet.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
so-
actually
3 days. Yeah.
we actually skipped over Mars.
No. Hold on a second. I got questions. Don't even. You wait a minute.
I was just going to ask him how he died. That's all. I didn't want to go.
Yeah, I before we get into that part, I'm so curious. So say that you cut yourself now. Does your body heal like normal? Like, because yeah.
Yeah, your body heals like normal, and that was something else I was curious about, where scars were still there from when I was young and everything else like that. And I said whenever they age regress do your scars come back? And he said, yes. Because I remember that woman, April, that I knew. We went to Plymouth one time, like a group of friends. We all went to, because that was the nearest movie theater in England was Plymouth. And she talked about how she had a tooth implant. She got one of her front teeth knocked out when she was a kid, and she had a tooth implant. And I asked Robert, I said, I remember her telling me this story, and she was in the programs too. I said, so, when you get age regress, what happened? Her tooth just fell out again? Like it just came out again? And he said, yes. He said, it pretty much just makes, it just brings you back. It's almost like it takes an exact photograph of your body the way you were before you left, and then it makes your body that same exact way when you come back. And I said, well, how do they get, the titanium implant back into her skull and everything like that? He said the drones do it, because the drones are just, the first little thing I saw, that little light brown alien with the big black eyes. And they are like machines, they're basically machines. So they can put it in exactly the angle that it was in before you left. So they re-drill, the titanium screw in, they put the tooth back in, once you come back from the program. So everything comes back. If you have a plate, if you have like a synthetic knee, they'll put your synthetic knee back in. Then they'll put you in a healing tank and heal you back up, or in a med bed, and they'll heal you up from the surgery. But they perform like surgery on you almost if you have like, anything, a plate in your head, anything like that, or a synthetic knee. They'll just they'll bring it back in you.
Even when they go through all that to fix you, they don't even pay you for any of this. You don't have any memories, all that. You come back with PTSD, and they still give you back all the injuries that they fixed to have you, right? Like they don't even fix your body for you as a reward for all the stuff you did.
Well, they usually give you almost like kind of a clean bill of health, in the sense that they'll put you in a med bed and they'll put you back. They'll, like, if you have certain things wrong with you, but it's things that are too obvious, like if you wore glasses, they want you to be pretty much back to the way you were before you left the program. So nobody's
so
the
you
wiser.
won't have cancer or something like that, but you'll still have bad eyesight.
Yeah, you'll still have like your old like injuries, but they'll help you on other things, like, if it's something more subtle, like if you have tinnitus, like ringing in the ear, they'll cure your tinnitus for you, things like that. And yeah, it was something they didn't do for me, he said, because the Germans were upset with me because of the way I was speaking to Aquino, and they didn't like that, so they were kind of mad about that. So, and there were like a couple Germans that messed me up in the med bed, and it was the Master Chief of the base and a chief that had a mustache, and he wore glasses, and they were both off-world Germans. And he told me, yeah, and they made certain things that were wrong with me worse, my tinnitus, things like that. They were just, messing with me in the med bed. But he told me that they were punished for that, for doing that to me, because they didn't realize that I had kind of this authority either, and they didn't know it at the time either. And he said they got 50 years basically in a prison, like on their home world, for what they did to me. And
really?
I said, well, I said, well, that's pretty good. And he kind of shrugged his shoulders, and I said, what? And he said, off-world Germans live over 800 years. I said, so? He said, so that's like 6 months to them, basically, in jail.
Wow.
As far as like their actual lifespan.
Still 50 years, man. Oh my God.
Yeah. But he said, it's nothing like the prisons on Earth. And I even asked him, I said, did they get conjugal visits? He said, yeah. They're basically just going to study and read for 50 years. It didn't seem like, it didn't seem like punishment, a real punishment.
So let me ask you about with the Taigetans and all that. When you talk about the food that they eat and everything, how they have knowledge of consciousness and development, what do they think about us as far as our food and all the ways we're poisoned and manipulated, and we're still here?
Yeah.
Right. Think about, we're still trying, like, even with all that against us. So what do they feel about that?
Well, it's like, they basically just feel like, we have a lot more learning to do. But in the same sense, they're very neutral. I've heard some people say that they're jerks, like people that have met them, in the military in different shows. Like something I watched something where some guy said, that they're, assholes or jerks. And I kind of see that in the sense that they are like, they have their own people to worry about, and that's kind of like how they think. Like we're worried about our own world. We're trying to keep our own people alive, and we'll help if we can, but basically we're more worried about ourselves, and that's kind of like how they think. And I was talking to the king one time. It was after Mother attacked me, and well, this happened like in public. I would talk to him a lot, like almost like in his. He had almost like a throne room kind of thing where you walked upstairs and there was like this throne, and then the queen sat next to him, and there would always be like a large group of others that would kind of watch, and they were interested in me. And so if I ever like if he ever called me towards him and he would ask me things, that we usually have like a large group of people. And when Mother attacked me, they basically just did the same thing they did, because it was just something they were so not used to, someone being aggressive like that. They kind of they get really wide-eyed and their mouths just open up. They're like, and they kind of cock their heads like they really don't know like what to do or think. And I eventually two other like warrior casts came up and they grabbed her because I said, is someone going to help me with her? And eventually two others came up and they grabbed her and they pulled her away. And I said, this is how your people react when someone's in trouble. You just stare with your mouths agape and your eyes wide. And I said, this is what's happening on my world. I said, all you're doing is you're just standing there and you're just staring and you're letting it happen. And I kind of gave them, an analogy of, if there was a man raping a woman and two men walked by, and not only did they not try to stop it, but they just stood there and they just stared and watched it happen. I said, wouldn't those two men be just as guilty as the actual man committing the rape? And he said, yes. And I said, well, that's what your world's doing. I said, my world's being raped and you're just standing there and you're just staring and you're watching it happen. And I said, and now that you know that this is, how it is, I said, this is going to be upon you and your children and your children's children. And I said, all we need is help to get the boot off our neck. I said, and then help us stand up. I said, that's all we need. I said, there's others like me that are willing to fight. I said, just get the boot off our neck and help us up and we'll do the rest. And he said, you're right. He said, we'll help you. And Robert even said that to me. He said they originally weren't going to help us, but he said, you changed their mind. And then I remember telling that story after he told me these things. But yeah, they're kind of like that. They're kind of neutral when it comes to other beings that need help.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. So we interviewed somebody last week and they're saying the reason there is the hybrids and all that, the hybrid, where they splice human and gray and all these different aliens, is
the hybridization.
Our consciousness, once we get together, you can take both consciousnesses together, and now you have that that knowledge of both races in one person. So is that essentially what they did with you as well? Because what they did was they took you and then they bred, how many children out of you, but they also took into that your personality. What you just said right there wore off on them, amongst other things, right?
Oh,
yeah, I mean, I remember when Aquino was torturing me, he was kind of looking up and down my timeline, the reptile, whatever you want to call it. And he was trying to see if what I said was true, but I was their king and things like that. And he said the reason they did it, and I remember others saying this to me too. He said, you're a reptilian consciousness, like my consciousness is reptilian. But he also said I was an empathic telepath. And he said there's maybe 4 or 5 of you in the entire universe. And he said that and to be genetically compatible with them, considering I was a reptilian consciousness, because they're kind of like antithesis, like they're kind of on polar opposites. He said that doesn't happen. And so Robert explained to me the reason they did it was because 3rd and 4th density beings see 5th density beings as naive, in the sense that they have a kind of attitude where if this is mutually beneficial for both of us, why would you ever betray us? They really don't have that kind of concept. So it was almost like it was not only because I was you know, an empathic telepath, which, like I said, is almost like a translator. I don't need to know the language. I don't need to know. They could be a higher density than me. I could still communicate with them because I do it on an emotional and like a verbal level, in the sense that hearing the words in your head level. So it was almost like an opportunity that they wanted to get almost more, I guess, streetwise, and to be able to, because they don't have like, they didn't have the ability to put like a reptilian consciousness into their bloodlines, and they saw that as an advantage. So it was like a way to make them more streetwise, a way to put like you said, this other like bloodline of consciousness into their people. And yeah, it was just it was an opportunity that they wanted to take advantage of. And yeah, Robert even told me, yeah, they were using you on that level, in that sense.
So do you think, and I don't want to blow your head up here, but if you're saying that you're one of 4 people in the universe and you're compatible with them at this stage in life, wouldn't that be like something of a miracle that God would have put you here, if you want to believe that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I believe in intelligent design. That's for sure. But
How else
yeah,
does it happen?
it was a miracle in the sense that, yeah, like I think that it was destined to happen on some sort of level. And but I mean, there are other beings that are empathic telepaths, but I guess for a reptilian kind of consciousness bloodline, it's very, very rare. It's like a very rare thing that it doesn't really happen. But there are other beings that are empathic telepaths, but even that in itself is very rare.
Mm-hmm.
And like as I said, that like Robert said, you were able to speak to the children. He's like, that was one of the main things that kind of caught their eye about you, and why they were interested in, because none of them can do that. They can't hear that pig Latin kind of emotional, almost like speaking through pure emotion, the way the children can speak. They can't do that as adults. And for an adult to be able to do that, they found that like very remarkable.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that they're very high in ascension compared to what we are, because we're on a lower density, but we're very empathic and they're very neutral. They have technology that we don't have. So it's almost like polar opposite, interestingly, but it almost scares the shit out of me to think that when we ascend, are we all gonna just be neutral? Because like I kind of like having emotion. You know what I mean? Like the highs and lows. It's like, are we heading to neutrality? Is that where we're going?
Yeah, it's a good
Well, I
question.
mean, I guess, but at the same time, it's just, I would say that whole collective thing is what kind of puts that back in order. Because there's like a sense where you don't ever really feel lonely, you know? I mean, you could be in the biggest city, and you could be in New York City, and you know, you could be the loneliest person on earth, you know, because we're such individuals. But for them, it's like they have less of an individuality kind of sense. So it's almost more of a peacefulness, in the sense that you don't ever feel alone. And you can, you know, when you're living in a society like that, a higher density, where everybody's a telepath, you can always kind of, especially if you're in like a group setting, you can always hear conversations going on, and it's almost like you feel like you're a part of that, even if you're not actually communicating with the others. And then, you know, there's ways to filter it out, but you can always kind of hear it in the background, so you can always hear the voices of, you know, others speaking together. So it gives you like a real sense of, I don't know, coming together, kind of.
All right.
It gives you that, yeah, you don't ever feel alone when you're at that kind of higher density.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering, like, all the emotions that we have as human beings, like we're so broad in that compared to what I see in extraterrestrials. So you mentioned that they cannot put the reptilian DNA into their consciousness, right? And they think it's a positive, and I'm looking at it like it's a negative thing. Like they're really gullible, like they don't have that street sense, like they could be manipulated by a reptilian very easily, right?
Yes, but
I
I
mean,
mean, they don't. Yeah, they don't have a good and evil mindset. You know, like that's very us. I think that's a big thing. What we need to get rid of, whether it's in
get
like
rid of.
movies. Yeah, in
Isn't
my
it
opinion.
something you want to control though? Like it's like if you're somebody that's powerful, you can control it is better than somebody who's not powerful at all and just isn't controlling it. You feel me? Like it seems
Well,
like if you're
yeah,
conscious, you'd want to have a broader spectrum of everything
and
instead
that's
of
what they
denying
want.
things.
Yeah, that's what they want in that sense, where they're kind of almost like too pure on the sense of positive, and they have a higher, these higher consciousness ETs. They have more of a mindset where one can't exist without the other. So it's not a bad thing in the sense that it's just the way it is. It's the duality of the universe. You need the duality of you need a positive and a negative to create an electrical current. One can't exist without the other. It's just the way it is. And it's not really considered like one's evil and one's, good. It's more because it's just the whole, even the most positive of beings don't have negative traits, and even the most negative of beings have positive, don't have positive
Yeah.
traits. It's kind of like that, so you really can't. Yeah, and this whole good versus evil thing, it really doesn't. They coexist kind of. They go to war and things like that, but then they also have, you know, they'll sit at a table and they'll talk about, what they want in the sense of like a peace treaty and things like that. And so
Yeah.
it's just it's it's very
Like I said,
much.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say essentially what you're saying. So you got Tigettans over here that are all positive, and then you got reptilians over here that are all not positive, or what do you want to call light and dark? So in a human being, you have that in the universe as your balance of energy, like you said. But in a human being, you have both of those things, right?
I mean, yeah, but as I said, even they still have, it's like the yin and the yang. It's like you have the light side has the dark spot, and the dark side has the light spot, and that represents that even, you still have some of those traits, even, even if you're on one side or the other, you still experience the other side of, the other side of the coin. It's not just black and white completely, they're shades of gray. But I mean, and they're like that, but it's just more in your face and more there, and I mean, they do have emotion, but it's just they just don't express it in the same way that we do. I remember one time I was talking to leader, and I just kind of said, I didn't even mean it to be offensive. And this is something else when you first start like speaking telepathically that you have to kind of watch out for. You kind of just say the first thing that's in your head because you're communicating in your mind. And they don't play with their children. Like they don't do that. They just kind of like watch their children play. They just like cross their arms and they kind of watch, and they'll laugh every now and again. If two kids bump into each other and fall down, they'll laugh. And they kind of just watch their children play. They don't interact with their play. And I said the leader, I said something. I didn't even really mean it, but I said it because it was in my head. I said, "Well, you don't love your children the same way we do." And he got right in my face, and he said, "What are you trying to
Yeah.
say? That I love my children? Is that what you're trying to say?" And I said, "No." And it really knocked me off guard because he never really it seemed to get upset with me before, and he seemed upset. And I said, "No, that's not what I'm saying." And he said, "Well, what are you trying to say?" And I said, well, I shouldn't have said that. I misspoke. I apologize. And then he just dropped it. But he just was letting me know, like, I might not express it in the same way you do, but I love my children. And it really offended him that I said that. So,
Kind of took his kindness for weakness.
yeah, yeah. So it's, and they also live, over 3,000 years. So it's just, and they remember all their past lives. So it's just, they've been
Oh,
here
they
a long,
do.
So that, yeah, they remember. That's part of their schooling. That like their schooling is they remember. They're taught to remember all their past lives. So if they've ever done anything in the past, in a past life, whether it's working on a hydroponics farm or being a pilot or anything else, or working in medical, they'll remember all those things. So they really don't. They go through a form of training, but it's just at the same time they remember all these past lives, so that they remember all the training from all their other lives.
And that's why they're like what you would deem a healed civilization. Because I mean, us on Earth, we're going to quantum healing hypnosis to unfold a past life that caused a trigger for a trauma in this life. And so if they know their past life traumas and past life lives, then that's probably why they're just so balanced. Like you start learning about these things, you can't be triggered by things that happen because you know what's happening. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know why it's happening.
They have a much more. It's like their duality is like man and woman, male and female. That's on their world. That's like their duality, and they have a much more like the women are more in the spiritual sense, and the men are much more on the physical sense. So they do have a religion, kind of, I guess you would say, but their religion is it's just more that duality, and it's like the religious leaders are more women, like they're more like you know priestesses, I guess you would say. Like if they're having a kind of a religious ceremony, it's more like a group of women that would do it. But it's just that whole aspect where, and that's something they feel with the duality itself is the physical aspect is more of the male, so the male seems more dominant in the physical aspect, but then the female is more dominant in the spiritual aspect. So they have that kind of attitude as well.
Did you say that in one of these temples that they pulled your heart chakra out of your body or something like that? Was that you that said that? You were praying with one of your girlfriends. I don't know who it was, but you did some kind of spiritual thing together, and she pulled your heart chakra out of your body. Maybe that was somebody else.
Yeah, I think that was somebody else.
That was you.
I mean, they have ways of healing, and they'll even say that too. Or if somebody has been, abducted by reptiles and they had to work with the reptiles for a long time, they'll go through trauma. And but their trauma is more like, well, I remember like the warrior caste is a type of male where they're much bigger than the regular men. They're stronger, and they don't have like a fear of death, like at all. And
so they have two different kinds of men.
Yeah, they have two different kinds of men because of the reptiles. It was something that they basically had to engineer because the reptiles have their warrior caste and they're always at war with them. So they had to like almost create like a hybrid male that would be something that would be able to compete with reptiles. Some very much stronger, faster, and they have no sense of fear. And like Leader's son, when he was young, I guess his father was teaching him this. They kind of teach you to confront your fears. It's almost like a kind of psychotherapy. And that way they'll replay the fear over and over again, like in your mind. And it's just like a way that you won't fear it anymore if you replay it enough. And you figure out what aspects of that make you afraid. And they really they do things like that when they're very young to their sons, these warrior caste men. And I guess like Leader's son was in the middle of this, so he was kind of doing it to me, and I was sitting down, and we had like kind of like a a family day like once a week, and I would play music for them and everything like that. And I was sitting down, and he put like his hand, he like put his hand on my knee. He was young, he was little, and he looked up at me, and he was saying, he got me to remember, like he found out what hurt me the most, I guess, when I was with the reptiles. And it was this event that happened to me with a clone where they had me take a clone of myself and they brought it into like the reptiles like private office room or whatever you want to call it, I guess, where they ate, and they were very secluded there. And this was in the Dark Fleet, and they ate this clone of me in front of me, and it yelled and screamed, and it was very traumatic for me. And so leaders, it was almost like he caught on to that, because like I said, they're telepaths, so they could catch on to these things. And he had this replay through my mind over and over again. And he kept on saying, like, it's helping him, it's helping him. And I remember I said, stop. I said, stop it, stop doing this. And it actually caused me to go into a seizure, which I'm not prone to seizures, but I went into a seizure because of it. Because it was like I was reliving it again and again. And that was like, it helped me. And I even told him later, like I said, I didn't want him to be afraid that he did that, because it helped me. And it helped Mother, basically helped me relive the situation. I was going through teachings with her of how to kind of not really erase that part of my past, but to be able to live with it, in the sense to be able to conquer the fear and live with it. But yeah, it was something that he did. And I remember, like, when I was having a seizure, I could still hear everybody, and like they didn't know what was happening, because I don't think that happens to them. And he kept saying, it's helping him, it's helping him. And the dad, leader, eventually told him to stop it, to stop doing that. And yeah, I went through a seizure. And
what happened? You said a reptilian was eating a clone of you in front of you?
yeah, like when I first got into the Dark Fleet, everybody was very terrified of the reptiles, and I didn't understand why. They wouldn't make eye contact with them. They're afraid of them. And I think that's part of initiation. They make a clone of you and they eat it in front of you. And the clone, maybe it doesn't have a consciousness, or maybe it has some sort of shared consciousness, but it still has a sense of self-preservation. It wants to live. It still has like that kind of self-preservation in its mind. And yeah, it was a clone, and it looked like me. It had longer hair. It had like hair like down to its chin. Its bangs were in its face at first. And it was sitting on a table, and it was naked. And then it looked up at me, and I realized it was like a clone of me. And Mother called it something I don't remember, but it was like a immediate bond you make when you first see a clone. It's like seeing a long lost twin, and it's like you make this bond. And yeah, I think that's just something that they do. It's part of the initiation or something. It was like the first week I was there, they did that.
Yeah, that'll get your attention, won't
it? Yeah.
I was going to say, you mentioned before that your body is on Mars, hanging out still. How did you get killed on Mars? How did that happen?
It was just, they really didn't train you very much. It was very bizarre. It was just, you were very expendable to the Germans. And we just got overrun by reptiles. There was like a reptile. They don't all work for the Draconians, and there are like ones that are more positive. And there's kind of like a positive group of reptiles on Mars. And we basically got overrun. And yeah, I was killed on Mars by a bunch of reptiles.
So the reptiles sent you to fight the positive reptiles.
Yeah, there was like a breakaway of reptiles on Mars.
Okay. So what happens?
They would align with the mantises, these reptiles, and we're mostly there to get mantises because they're really good at DNA manipulation.
Right. So does mantis fight as well as they do here on Earth? The way the little ones. You ever watch a praying mantis fight?
Well, Am
I the only one?
They have the same amount of legs. I think like 6 legs or something like that. But each leg has like a kind of three fingers, but they're pointed. It's like an exoskeleton. So the tip, it's not really nails. It's just they're pointed, and they can like if you see them work on something like a piece of machinery, they'll kind of prop themselves up on their very hind legs, and they'll use the other two sets of legs to work. And
They
when
got
they're
four
fighting,
hands if they want.
yeah, when they're fighting, they usually carry like a weapon in the front uh, hands, the front two arms, and they'll use the other two sets of arms to like run, and they can run really fast. Or if they don't have any, they can just run on all six legs, and they're very quick that way.
Wow. I was just wondering because they're on this. If you ever see a praying mantis, how they get their food, they are lightning fast. Like they'll take out something 3 times the size of it without a problem.
You're
Yeah, but they
talking
don't have
about
like
the
those
bug, right?
claws.
Or
Yeah.
are you talking about the bug or like an
Yeah, the
Talking
bug.
about them
alien?
both, but essentially the bug here. So they don't look like the bug we have here.
Yeah, they don't have like the two bent like forward. They all like each limb has like these 3 prongs, like these 3 fingers, like a
Oh,
thumb
I
and 2
got you.
fingers. So they don't have like that front thing like the mantises on Earth, like the 2 claws. Yeah, it's almost like they have 6 hands.
Right. So let me ask you, okay, see how this works. You get killed on Mars. How, if your body's still there, do they get your consciousness? Does that go right back to the regeneration tank and you wake up in there?
Well, I woke up and like it was a tube that had like a glass window on the front, but it was kind of like propped up against like a wall. It almost seemed like it wasn't straight up and it wasn't laying down. And I just remember I just woke up. It was just like it felt like I just woke up, and
But
there
your
was like a
consciousness will just travel right back to the other body.
well, they have like I said, the ships have these abilities to where they can actually like harness the consciousness, and then it's sent into this other clone after that. So it just doesn't go directly to your clone.
Oh, so they're
But
snatching it out of the air then. Is that really what they're
yeah, so
doing?
they're getting it out of the astral plane
Oh,
is what they're doing, and then they put it into the body afterwards from the astral plane, the spirit
hmm.
world, whatever you call it.
So if they want to, essentially, there is no going back to source for any of us. If they're just snatching out consciousness out of the astral realm or wherever, how do you get back to source? God, I
Well, I
mean.
mean, they can't always do it. They can't, I remember there were people that would die sometimes. It's not a 100% thing that they can do, but they can do it most of the time.
That makes me think of what there's a lot of near-death experiences who do actually believe we live in a soul trap, like a reincarnation cycle where essentially Earth, this reality we're in, is just a huge harvest of our energy. And that's why we're living like slave labor and we are very heavily programmed and things like that. What's your take on all of that since your experience?
I mean, Robert went into that a bit, and I heard it was like the rings of Saturn, but I think he was more like it was like the magnetic field of the Earth itself was kind of aligned in a way. I don't know the harmonic frequency of it.
Is that to do
Was
with
like
like the Van Allen belt and all that? Is that anything?
yeah, like the Van Allen belt, or I mean, I think that's where the whole firmament thing comes from as well, and he told me about that too with the Kino, and that was him, but
Yeah. So you did mention
he
before with oh sorry. I thought you were done.
he said that there is like kind of like a soul kind of capturing system that happens on Earth that keeps us like imprisoned on Earth, where it is a prison planet in a sense. But I think like he said that would be taken down, and it has to do with the moon as well. The moon is a part of that of what keeps us like locked down, that keeps us imprisoned on Earth. But yeah, I mean, and then he told me about, like I said, I was talking about the firmament. He told me that when Aquino brought out his book Mind War, which came out in 1980, which is I haven't read the whole thing, but I've read parts of it, and it pretty much tells you like what's happening right now in the sense that you don't have to conquer a population anymore. You can just make them think that that's what they want in their minds, and that's how you can conquer them. Make them think this is what they want using technology and propaganda.
Mm.
And he told me that that's how the flat Earth thing came to be.
I was
Was
gonna ask you.
Yeah, Aquino was the one that brought up the flat Earth in like 1980 when he brought out Mind War.
Mm.
And I said, well, didn't people, long ago believe that they were flat? He said, yeah, people a long time ago believed it. He's like, but this new revival of flat Earth, he said that was Aquino. That was like because he's a psychological operations officer, and he said that they just the Satanists do things like that just to cause chaos. So we really don't know what to believe. If you don't know what to believe, then you're easily to manipulate, to control.
What do you believe?
It's a toroid, as far as I remember. Like I saw it from the ship the first time I saw it, and it's kind of like
It's open at both ends, right?
It kind of dips at the top and at the bottom, and that's where the poles are, where the ice caps are. It almost follows the magnetic field of the Earth itself. So it dips, and the oceans kind of get pulled apart almost. It looks like a donut and a blood cell kind of mixed together. It kind of dips and it goes around, then it dips back in at the bottom. And the continents are smaller than we're told, and the oceans are much more vast, much larger.
So you're one of those who you think it's like a donut. I've heard people saying that before, but I've never really thought about it. Like a
There's an
toroidal
opening at each
field, like our
Yeah, it's a
energy
toroidal,
field.
yeah.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah,
make
because the water
sense.
itself is being pulled by the magnetic field of the Earth, and the magnetic field is like a toroidal itself, and it
Right.
kind of follows the same pattern as like the magnetic field, the ocean itself.
Huh.
It would make sense that it would look like you said, like a blood cell. That's essentially right. Because when you look out in space and all these nebulas and everything, it really looks like the human body almost. Like if you look at the planets, they are like cells. And when they get together in a solar system, right, they turn into DNA or whatever. And then you got a galaxy that shows, a whole, like it, never mind. I hope you understand what I'm getting at. Like it's just you can see like what they say was. All right, listen, we'll edit this out. I can't hear you.
Yeah, my headphone fucked up for a sec. I think I'm connected now.
No, but do you know what I'm getting at? If you ever see that, you can look out and you can see like that nebula looks like an eyeball, and you can see one that looks like everything else.
Yeah, it's all it's all kind of relative. It's almost like our worlds are like the blood of the universe, I guess you could say, in a sense. But I mean, it's that's kind of how it looks. It's kind of how it looks. It looks almost like a blood cell in a donut. It has that dip on the at the top and the bottom like a blood cell does, but then it's more rounder on the edges like a donut. So I can kind of see like why some people think it's flat, because it's kind of flat at the top and bottom, but then it rounds out around the tropics and the equator.
So what is the moon? You said something about the moon. Is it really something that we need for our planet? Like it navigates the ocean's current and whatnot. Like, is any of that even true? Like, what is the moon?
I mean, Robert told me the moon was an observatory to kind of watch us. It's a stepping off point to where ships don't have to they don't take off directly from Earth. They take off from the dark side of the moon. And it's part of the reason why we age so quickly. It ages us quickly. It causes women to menstruate. I remember when I was in the moon with that woman April, and I asked her, I said, "Aren't you worried about getting pregnant?" And because it was a bad situation, I didn't think we could have kids here. And she said that she had more power in the sense of she was a nurse. She wasn't like one of the women working at the brothels or anything like that. And she said, "No, I can regulate that." She said we're in the moon, so it doesn't affect me. And I remember her saying that because she was inside of the moon, that the moon didn't affect her in the sense that where she had periods and things like that. So she was able to regulate it just through her smart glass pad and the tech in her body, whether or not she wanted to menstruate or not to have a baby.
Wow, I would love to get me one of those.
That's an
Yeah.
ability to have.
Yeah. So yeah, the moon ages us, and it causes women to menstruate.
Did Robert happen to ask or mention anything about the fallen angels here on Earth? And they speak about the fallen angels being trapped here in the Bible and all that.
Is that the Nephilim?
I don't know. I'm just saying, like, essentially, like Satan and all that are trapped here. Like if you read the Bible and everything, this is where God sent the ones that fought back against them in heaven.
Well, I mean,
I know
I don't know about Nephilim. I mean, he may have said something like that, but I remember he was big on black cubes. He didn't like black cubes. He said that the negative aspect of Earth was Satan, and he said that the positive aspect of Earth was the Anglo-Saxon. That's what he said. He said all worlds have a duality, but our world is quite different. He went to that, and he talked about the Anglo-Saxon mission, and he talked about like the black cubes, like in Mecca. And rabbis put the black cube on their forehead before they worship and stuff like that. He said the black cube is Saturn, and Saturn is Satan.
Satan,
So
yeah.
yeah, so it's the anytime he said black cube worshiping is like an aspect of like Satanism, kind of what he said.
What
He
is
said it was
black
like
cube?
the black. I don't know. I mean, which black cube? Just what is it in general? I think it's
Yeah.
they got
representation
one in Mecca.
of Saturn. Yeah, the one in Mecca and stuff like that. It's a reputation, and that's why the crescent moon and like the star, which is Saturn. That's on the flags and things like that, like in Turkey and everything. And he said that was like a representation of like the negative the negative polarity of Earth, like the negative aspect of Earth.
So is that relative to that black sun that they all have, that symbol?
I don't think it's that. I don't no. That was something the Germans did wear. They didn't wear a lot of swastikas. I didn't remember seeing swastikas, but they had like an armband that was a black sun. Yeah, they wore that.
I saw a symbol, all right, and this thing is a little bit disturbing, but it showed that the eagle, the Nazi eagle, and the Earth with that eagle, and then a big chain going around it, like we're enslaved to these people. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess we're enslaved to a point as far as like the Germans, the off-world Germans, but then they're enslaved to the Draconians, and the Draconians are enslaved to the artificial intelligence. So I mean,
Oh.
Is
All
there
I can
anybody that's
think
not
of.
enslaved?
Yeah. In a sense, it doesn't really scare me so much because, I mean, it is what it is. What can you do? You know what I mean? It's kind of like one of those situations. It's like, ah, fuck, I chose to come here. It's my soul contract. Don't know why I would have chose to do this, but here we are. It's part of the learning. Like, do you believe in any of that stuff as well? Like, this is soul contract. You chose this, and yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is all the whole free will thing where, what are you going to call it? The Draconians, the Satanists, the satanic aspect, the negative aspect of our world. They can't just, have you do something without you agreeing to it. So even people that join these programs that said they were picked up from when they were children and they didn't agree to this and it's not right. It's like, well, you did agree to this, on a soul level, whether you know it or not, whether you're conscious of this or not, you agreed to do this. You may have not signed a contract, not in this life, but in a former life, you signed some sort of, you made a deal of some sort.
You just reminded me of something. I saw this fucking video of Joe Biden. Like, you know how they talk about telling the truth in plain sight? And I shouldn't laugh about it because it's about what happened in Hawaii, with the fires. So he was talking about like, oh, there's a few roofs that had the right roofs on it, and and I was just like, is this fucking guy for real? Like he just straight up told the truth in plain sight. And like, but the thing is he sounds so stupid when he talks. No one's even gonna pick it up. They're gonna be like, what's he talking about? Like, the people that aren't aware of it. So I'm like, they're smart with Joe Biden. I see why they're using the stupid guy, because when he does tell the truth in plain sight, they get away with it. Because not everyone is in this community of disclosure who understands what's going on out there. So I was like, this motherfucker. Like, yeah, it just annoyed me, but it was kind of comical in a way. Yeah. Have
Yeah,
you
what?
seen what I'm talking about though?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard like on the tarmac, you know, Joe Biden having a conversation with, I think it was Chuck Schumer, and he even said, I don't think he's as dumb as he plays, because he said, I don't know how much longer I can, do this senile old man act, is what he basically said to him. So I don't think he's as dumb as they say. And he said, he keep on repeating the same thing. He's like, I don't think the people are gonna, fall for this any longer. And Chuck Schumer was like, well, if you just keep on saying it, they'll believe it, kind of thing. But yeah,
Do you
it's
think
just the
that's
whole.
the same him?
Oh, I
You
mean,
think
it
that's
it could be an actor, it could be a clone. I mean, you don't know. But I mean, that also falls on the whole Satanism thing, where if you're in chaos, then you're easy to control. So I just kind of think of it as, it's just a big show. These people are putting on a show.
Yeah.
They're just actors. And politicians. Politics is just Hollywood for ugly people, and that's all it is.
so?
Big, it's
Yeah,
just
it
a big
is.
play. And
Did
yeah, and I mean, they have to tell you what
Mm.
they're doing. It's just part of the whole Satanism thing. It's whether it's with the Georgia Guidestones, they tell you in that sense, or the Simpsons, and it's almost like they're
Yeah.
believing like, well, we're telling them what we're doing, we're showing them what we're doing, but they're not doing anything about it. So it's their fault. It's their fault. We're letting them know what we're doing to them, but we're not doing it. They're not trying to fight back, so it's their fault.
So everybody out there who's watching, let's fucking do something about this. Let's grab your pitchforks, whatever
yes.
that like what can we do that? Like, can we actually do something? Like, can we just be like, nah, fuck you. I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you my free will. Like,
Yeah.
can we do this? Or is this the fear that's stopping us thinking that, police are going to
Stop going
stop
to
us?
work.
Or yeah,
Stop paying your bills. What would happen if you?
Well, I mean, it's the fear thing, and it's the manipulation from when we were children. It's manipulation of Earth. So in a sense, I mean, I remember Robert. I kind of had this attitude too of like, why don't the people do anything? And he just looked kind of sad, and he said it's not their fault. He said, it's just they don't know. They just don't know any better, and it's not their fault. And I remember he said that one of the reasons Aquino tortured me so much is because when he did the whole reptilian shapeshifter thing, where he put his meat puppet or whatever you want to call it, and kind of blended the two images together, and kind of made it look like that a reptile became a human, but while the actual puppet master, which was the reptile, kind of walked back into the back shadows, and thought I couldn't see him, and I turned around. I looked over Aquino's shoulder, and I said, "Nice trick." I looked directly at the reptile, and I said, "Nice trick."
yeah, and they
He
didn't
said
like
that was
that,
one of the
right?
reasons. He said that was one of the reasons why he tortured me and went back
Yeah.
into my childhood and traumatized me in my childhood and things like that, was because of, if enough people can see, there's
Mm.
almost like that hundredth monkey effect, where there is like a mass consciousness of people, of human beings almost have like kind of a mass consciousness, and if enough people kind of catch on to their tricks, then everybody will be able to catch on to their tricks. So they
Yeah.
kind of try to take that ability away in your childhood, so you can't do it as much as an adult. So when they see that there are ones that can see past their tricks, it scares them, because that's like their whole power, is just like this trickery. And
Wow.
once you get enough people that can actually see past that, then the consciousness of Earth itself will be able to see past it. So it's like they
That's
try to.
like where we are right now, isn't it? Like mainstream media is all about disclosure. It's all about ET contact. When are they coming? When are they coming? Channelers are coming out. Mediums are speaking up. There's so much
Not
going
in
on.
mainstream.
No,
Not in
it's not.
mainstream.
It's not on mainstream, but it's all over TikTok, and everyone's on TikTok, right?
They're
It's
trying to ban it.
yeah,
They're
but even
trying to
when you
ban it.
get banned, there's people posting like, "Look, I got
No,
banned.
they're
They don't
trying
want
to
to."
ban TikTok itself in America. They don't want it at all here because they're trying to say China is starting a war and they're using this information as some blah blah blah. When all it really is you're being told the truth and they don't like the truth being told.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and you know,
Sure.
that's soft disclosure. And I forget who it was said that I don't know if it was a Rothschild or what, but yeah, it basically said the internet was a mistake. Like we should have never let it get this out of hand. And yeah, because before all you had was like the paper, you know. And I remember actually had a friend that had in high school, I think it was like 91 or 92 or something like that, where he actually had a VHS copy of the Montauk, the whole Montauk thing. When you used to have to order it online or order it, you know, through the mail. That's how the original, like, you know, Montauk, you know, with the group of people, Al Bielek and all that stuff. He had this. I think I was like a freshman in high school, and I remember watching that, and that was like, you know, the closest thing we got to any kind of like deep disclosure back when I was young. You actually had to know a friend of a friend that knew this, and you had to know the address to where you ordered this movie from.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember we were watching it one time. I found it very interesting. But, you know, with the internet now, it's just at you know, a click of your mouse, and you can find pretty much
It's
whatever
kind
you
of like
want.
when you finally found those VHSs of Faces of Death. You remember that
Yeah,
back in
I
the day?
mean, but it was deeper than that. I mean,
Oh
this
yeah, I
that
know
was
that.
pretty
I'm
great.
just saying it was
Yeah, Faces
you
of
had to
Death
go
was
down
like
into
was fake. Yeah, it was all fake. But yeah, this was this. I remember I had a friend. It was this. You know, he was a metalhead. He liked Metallica and stuff like that. He's like, "Oh, you got to check this out." And we started watching it. It was very interesting. Of the Montauk movies, all the interviews and everything.
so that all came well, they were saying like the, the X-Files and all that stuff came out of all stuff like the what do they call that, the Blue Book Project or some shit like that. Like all that's
Yeah,
far as soft disclosure is going is right there in the movie for you.
yeah, and a lot of the movies are soft disclosure too. Yeah, as well. They're telling you little truths here and there. And yeah, I was told it was just basically to kind of plant a seed into the subconscious of people, because we do have like this kind of, and people don't realize that we have a kind of mass consciousness. Like, and they did like a study. I think it was in like Sweden, where they had like a group of people. You know, several thousand people. Uh, well, what they did is they went to Australia. They took several thousand people from Australia, so Sweden and Australia, and they gave them a random test. And you know, they did what you thought they would do. They got like a 50% because nobody studied for the test and nobody knew what the questions were going to be. So then they took this like several thousand people from Sweden. They all studied for a different test. Then they studied, you know, for this test, and then they took a separate group of, you know, several thousand people from Australia, and they took the test, and they got like a 90%. So it was just because, like, you know, 5,000 people in Sweden studied for a test, and then 5,000 people in Australia took the test. It was almost like this mass consciousness kind of awoken. So they went from like getting a 50% to getting to another group of people getting like a 90%. And it was like, yeah, it was
No
just a
kidding.
kind of, yeah, it was a very interesting, yeah, and it's a
They were
study
able
they
to
did.
tap into the group consciousness like that, collective consciousness.
And it's like it's something we do, but we don't even know we can do it. So yeah, I mean, that was like a big part. What I guess what aggravated Aquino is I could see him doing that. So you know, that's what Robert explained to me. It was just, you know, there we have like a mass consciousness, and if enough people can see these things, then everybody will start seeing it, and
So
people will
that's
wake up.
essentially why the news is so horrific. They're trying to get us to manifest that kind of thing as a group consciousness.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and he talked about that. Yeah. He said that, you know, it's much more spiritual than you think. Like it's a lot more negative. It's in that sense, and in the sense of Earth, it's just a very negative spiritual aspect. He was telling me things like archons and things like that. And I asked what an archon is, and he said evil spirits. And I said those things exist. He said yeah, and he told
And
me
what
yeah,
are
like
they?
an
I've heard of
archon
them.
is, yeah, it's like an evil spirit. as far as what I know, it doesn't even really, it doesn't have a, it's not really self-aware in a sense. It's something that has been here forever. I think it was part of, I don't know, the agnostics or something like that, you know, like long ago with Babylonians knew about them and Sumerians knew about them. Sumerian texts talked about the archons. And it's almost just like this, and it was like a conspiracy even back then in Sumeria, where it's like this unknown, unseen kind of aspect of Earth that's actually infiltrating Earth, and we don't even know what's happening. We don't even know it's there. And yeah, it's just they don't know why they want it, but they want, you know, basically like loosh, so like fear, pain, and hatred. So that's why, you know, through movies and things like that, you know, everything that, you know, violent movies and, you know, horror movies and things like that. This is all to kind of tap into that whole loosh thing and to kind of like make our consciousness lower, our consciousness. So, you know, we're not, you know, we just can't even fight back. We're so crippled by fear and anger and hate and revenge. And, you know, what is every Western about? Revenge. You know, it's always about
Yeah.
revenge. Yeah, and it's like revenge will get you nowhere. Revenge will just bury you. It's just, you know, the best revenge is happiness. That's, you know, that's the
Yeah.
best revenge to have.
It is, ain't it?
Well, I will
Well,
just let you guys know we've been talking 2 hours and 3 minutes. So, and I know you
yeah.
said 2 hours. So, I mean, did you want to stop the podcast and
I mean, yeah, we just kind of we kind of winged it. I mean, did that feel more natural? I thought that
it was
feels more
good.
natural.
I actually really
Yeah,
liked it.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, if there's other like individual things you want to point or you want to, you know, to go on, then yeah, I could do like a part three. Like I said, I have to go to Texas this weekend, and then after that, I'm going to Los Angeles, then like in another like week and a half.
Yeah.
So I'll be kind of busy, you know, getting
Yeah,
like
yeah,
presentations.
that's fine. Yeah, you do your thing. There's no, you don't owe us
Yeah,
anything
man.
at all. Like, but
This is awesome.
I just love your story, and I just can't get enough. It's just so fascinating to me to hear your journey,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's
I
a
wanted
lot
to
more we
talk about
can.
something a little different. So that's cool. We did that.
Yeah, like we completely winged it. I didn't even really know what we were getting into, but I loved everything about it. So yeah. Well, I guess we could end the podcast on a positive note. What's something you would like to share with the viewers watching today as a takeaway from your message?
Um,
And not to put
well,
you on the spot.
yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is I remember helping to free like the children with the Tibetans in St. Maugen, England. We actually went back there and got a lot of and got, you know, the children out of those cages. And I remember I asked, you know, Robert, you know, he said all underground bases will be liberated. And I said, is this one? He said, we're working on it. And he said I would know when it went from JMF RAF St. Maugen to this RAF St. Maugen. The Navy would be gone. The U.S. Navy would be gone. It would just be Royal Air Force. And he said that's how you could tell, and that's happened already. That base I was
Has,
on.
That's amazing.
has that happened on the moon as well? That was liberated and all that?
Yeah, the
Like
moon
all,
was liberated before like the Earth, the underground bases on Earth were liberated. That happened like sooner. That was something we had to get rid of right away. And as I said, I wasn't a part of that. I wasn't a part of that actual liberation, but that's something that happened, and it was something that needed to happen before Earth could happen. Because, like I said, it was a kind of like it's how they kept an eye on us, it's how they observed us. It was almost like a mind control kind of thing as well. The moon itself, and yeah, I would say that. And he just told me it's going to be so much better, is what he said. He said it's going to be, you know, there are going to be conflicts, there are going to be wars, like this thing with Ukraine and things like that, you know, because there's a lot of negative kind of satanic things that were put into our minds. Or if anybody tries to fight back, you'll be called all kinds of names, and things like that. We've been kind of programmed to where, and if anybody fights against this programming, they'll be singled out and they'll be called names. But it's just something we'll have to get over. And yeah, he told me the economy is just going to be so much better. He told me the Library of Alexandria, as I said before, wasn't burned down. I mean, the building was burned down, but all the books and scrolls and tablets and everything else were taken out. They're put it into the catacombs of the Vatican. He said all that knowledge will be released to the public. And he said that, it's just going to be so much better. And I mean, what is it? Trump, one of his things that he's putting out with this agenda or whatever he's putting out, he said there's going to be three more major cities built in the United States. They're building 3 more major cities in the U.S. and hopefully that will happen. But he said everybody's going to be able to take a nice vacation. Nobody will have to worry about money again. Money's going to work for us. We're not going to work for money. But he said that everybody's going to have to work. Our infrastructure is going to have to be completely rebuilt. And hopefully these new cities will be almost like the Tartarian kind of city, where it just won't be, a soulless block with some windows. It'll actually have some sort of, character and soul, and, like the cities we used to build, like the World's Fair and things like that. Hopefully like that kind of architecture.
Like the Roman Empire and things like that, and the colors and marble and sandstone and all that beautiful. Yeah.
You get rid of the
attention to
institutional
detail in
look.
every way.
Yeah, everything
But yeah,
looks
I mean,
like a block.
Yeah, everything looks soulless, and yeah, when you walk out in the city, you just you can't take it. It's just horrible. Like I was in like an old what do you call that? Iron Curtain. I was in the Baltics, which was part of the Iron Curtain. It's just a lot of those communist buildings. Everything's just gray and glass, and that's all it is. Everything, all the apartments are gray, and it's just gray and glass. And it was like a way to demoralize people. It's a way to kill your soul, like kill your willingness to live, and that's what it is done on purpose. And yeah, he told me all this, everything's a lie. Evolution's a lie, science is a lie. All these things are lies, and it's just to make you feel insignificant, like a speck, like you don't matter.
Yeah, they took our history away. They took all that away.
Yeah, we matter. We matter more than we actually know of.
And I said leave a positive message. Not everything's a fucking lie.
But it's true. Well, they pit us against each other because they stole our history, so they can make anything up they want. Yeah. So they can say like essentially white people enslaved black people, when it was probably the reptilians that did all that to begin with. Well, none of us, right? I mean, just saying, just hypothetically.
But I mean, what I'm trying to get to is, that's the way it is now, and we're going to get to a point where the infrastructure is just going to get built like you wouldn't believe. We're going to have rail systems. We're going to be able to, go from, United States to Australia in a couple hours. We're not going to have to take an 18-hour flight.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get to
meet. But I mean, and he told me, he said, we're not going to have any kind of programs. He said, as far as we're not going to have any kind of government subsidies, in the sense of no more welfare and no more disability. He said people are going to be able to go into med beds, and if they have any kind of, anything wrong, like any kind of traumatic events that happen in their childhood, these med beds are going to be able to help solve this. So PTSD and things like that are going to be able to be cured. No, it's just not going to be physical ailments. It's going to be, psychological ailments as well. And he just told me it's going to be so much better. He said the economy is going to be better. The money's going to work for us. We're not going to work for money. We're not going to be enslaved anymore. Things like usury are going to be a thing of the past. You can't make money out of nothing. He said that's not going to be allowed any longer. And just the
stock market and all that bullshit.
None of it. None of it anymore. And it's just going to be so much better. And he was almost in tears, like when he told me that. He said it's going to be so, like, he was so proud of what he did, and he was very emotional about it. And he said,
"I can't wait for that day."
Yeah.
The day that them
I mean,
guys come out of the stock market and they got to do construction for a living, I'm gonna love it.
yeah,
You
and I think
finally work.
I think that's going to happen soon, and I feel like it's happening soon, and I feel like especially with everything that Trump said about how we're getting rid of, as you said, like affirmative action. We're getting, we're going to start building more cities. The United States is going to become alive again. And I just don't think it's going to be the United States. It's going to be worldwide. But a big part of what the Satanists believed was America had to fall first for the rest of the world to fall. He told me that. He said that was something they really believed, and they wanted that to happen. But none of that's going to happen anymore. Yeah, the rest of the world is just. We're not going to have these world wars anymore that are just done to you know decrease the population and just cause strife and anger and hatred against each other. Yeah, the world's going to be more of harmonious in the future.
So
And
would you say that an easy way for people to actually see who the good and bad people or positive and negative are is to basically flip everything over that the media tells you? So if the American government's telling you that they're on the side of the Israelis, we should probably be on the side of the Palestinians instead. Like, is it something like that?
well, yeah, he said we've been under satanic rule for so long, and everything is inverted, and that's what basically satanic rule means. The good guys are the bad guys, the bad guys are the good guys, and the good guys haven't won for a long time. He said for centuries, and he
Right.
said that.
So
Yeah,
anybody that they post up and say that these are great people and all this, if they're propping them up, they're probably the worst people. And the ones that they're putting down, like when they put a Joe Rogan or whoever, these other guys that are telling the truth, when they're putting them down, they're actually the people that are trying to help you.
well, yeah, I mean, like with he told me that Russia would become the world power, and that China would become the economic power. So it'd be
Maybe
kind of like
Kiss said that.
a rule of Russia and China. And he said the way that happened was they couldn't come to an agreement, that they almost got into a war over that, of who would become the next world power. So then it became, well, whoever has the most natural resources, because we're going to need those resources to build ships and things like that to get into the game, to get up there. And that would be how it was settled. And you actually hear Putin. I mean, what was that one thing he said? He said, your vampire ball is over. He said that. He basically called like the Western elites vampires. He said your vampire ball is over. And
Wow.
yeah, and he said
I,
that. And yeah, he
So
talks
he
about,
knows he's the good
oh
guy.
yeah, yeah,
I
he
don't know
knows,
about
yeah.
that, but yeah.
And he told me that he wasn't actually the Putin of the KGB, that guy was killed a long time ago, and the Putin that they put in his place is actually a direct descendant of the czars, of the Russian royal family.
Oh,
Wow.
Anastasia and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Heck yeah.
yeah, he's a direct descendant of the Tsar, the royal family of Russia. So the original Putin, the KGB Putin, was like assassinated a long time ago.
I'll
And
tell you what, on Netflix right now, there's like a 4-part movie thing with Oliver Stone interviewing Putin. Like, you got to read the subtitles, but man, you should, if you ever get a chance, if you want to hear what Putin really thinks about us over here and the world itself, it's in there.
What's the movie?
Like,
What's it called?
it's on Netflix. It's just look up Oliver Stone and Putin. It's like a 4-part. It's like 4 hours long, but
Mm.
it's incredible. That guy does not pull no punches. It's
and
actually
Putin,
refreshing to finally hear a politician speak like a normal human being. It's like,
yeah, Putin in that interview he did with Tucker Carlson, people thought it was dumb, but he did something that Robert said was going to happen, where he went back in time and said, well, what are borders? Are we talking about the borders from, the year 750 AD? Or are we talking about borders now? And Robert told me that was going to happen. Something like that was going to happen, where he said, but, we're taking, borders are going to go back to the way they originally were, like, centuries ago. Like that's going to become like our borders in that sense. Like, and yeah, Putin was saying the same thing.
yeah.
We're going back to like our original before we were put under satanic rule, and countries were broken up into smaller areas so they were more easily managed and things like that. And, you know, different populations were moved here and there. He said, like, all these original borders were going back to our original borders, you know, from before we were under satanic rule.
Edgar Casey said that back in the 50s that Russia would save the planet from destruction. I don't know how he put it, but saved it from World War III, essentially. You know, so anyway.
Yeah, and there was like some sort of a woman. She was like I don't know, considered almost like a prophet by the Russians. I think I don't know if it was late 19th, early 20th century, and she said that,
Maria Orsic?
No,
Maria
no,
Orsic?
she was Russian. She was Russian, not German.
Oh.
But she talked about it. Well, I have like a big Russian audience because I had like Russian translator that translated a lot of my work. And I told them about this stuff with Russia being the next world power, and a lot of the fans they said that, you know, they gave me this woman, I don't remember her name, but yeah, she was like a prophet to the Russian people and said that, you know, Russia would bring the 1,000 years of peace, and that was something else. Robert, he said we'll be in 1,000 years of peace and beyond. He brought up 1,000 years of peace and beyond.
Is that what's referred to in the Bible about the 1,000 years of peace?
Yeah. It was almost, yeah, he said it was almost kind of a biblical thing we were going through right now. Yeah.
Certainly feels that way.
Yeah, it
Half the
does.
planet's on fire. All we need is some locusts to start running around and it'll be all biblical.
So to bring you back to, I guess, the end of the positive message of the podcast, we kind of trailed off a little bit there, but I just wanted to add, just before we go, with all that you just mentioned, do you think you'll be alive to see any of this positive change? Like, do you know kind of when in the foreseeable future that this might occur?
He said it would happen in my lifetime, but when I asked him, are we going to ascend to 5th density, he just kind of smiled and he wouldn't tell me.
Oh, so it's like a to be continued.
He just smiled and he wouldn't tell me. But he said this mass consciousness is going to happen. Our mass awakening is going to happen within my lifetime.
Well, with saying that, guys, let's leave this at a to be continued, and we'll see you again in the future.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daryl.